It's common to see a game get pushed back in its development time, so when a new trailer for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was dropped that pushed the release date forward, I think that really surprised us all. Hey everyone, it's Yggdrasil, and welcome back to another Xenoblade Chronicles 3 analysis video. Nintendo decided not only to drop on us new in-game cutscenes and dialogue, but also our first taste of combat. Now, between almost 3 minutes of both cinematic analysis and combat analysis to go through, not to mention also Nintendo Japan's combat video, I am going to be splitting my analysis in half, starting with the non-combat side of things. If this is your first time looking at anything revealed, this is a horrible first way to get a look at any of the new info. Go and watch the trailer, which I'm going to link down below, and come on back here, huh? Now, this first video is entirely about the new cutscenes and images that we've been handed, and I'll likely be making a third video about these trailers since we are getting more info from day to day, with like how we did when the first trailer was released. Additional info is going to be posted by Nintendo, but as usual, Nintendo of Japan has had much more concrete information to work with compared to the UK or America, so we'll be making full use of that. Now, as with the previous trailer videos, I will not be bringing up anything that is Xenogears or Xenosaga related, but I will again be bringing up spoilers for all the Xenoblade Chronicles games. At most, I may make only one or two quick Gears or Saga references, but I'll let you know. I encourage you to listen to either Luxon or Annel's videos about the trailers because they bring up thematic tie-ins to those series, and having not played them before, I'm just not qualified to talk about any of those themes from Saga or Gears and give them any real justice. If you want to play any of these Xeno games yourselves, definitely do that as they're only a little over 2 months before Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is released. Lastly, if you haven't already done so, I'd highly recommend you check out my other analysis videos for the first trailer and information drops, and check up with me on my Twitter in the link below, where I can talk with you a lot more freely than with what YouTube allows. With that said, let's get right into the video. Now, before we actually start looking at footage, there are two key things that dropped around the same time as the trailer. The first is a very massive story leak that has a lot of implications for the plot of the game, and it came from GameStop's page for the game of all things. In the promotional material for pre-ordering the base game, they have this little bit of flavor text with some very huge news that probably shouldn't have been put up. It says, "Every minute counts for the soldiers of Ionios, who are given a mere 10 years to live and fight. Join Noah and Mio, members of two opposing factions, as the center of this conflict on a heartfelt journey to end the cycle of violence. A group of 6 characters from these nations join together to awaken the colonies of Ionios to the underlying threat both nations face. Traverse massive fantastical sci-fi landscapes as you expose the true enemy pulling the strings behind the conflicts." This one little drop provides so much context, it's actually crazy and upsetting to me as a player that it was revealed. The flame clocks reference that Uni alludes to in the first trailer, what good is it filling up these flickering clocks in our eyes, means that there is a way to charge up the flame clocks that all these soldiers are imbued with. But if that ultimately will mean anything at all, probably not, because they only have about 10 years to live, unless of course filling them up extends their lifetime. But again, that's pointless anyway, because that means that these soldiers only exist to keep fighting, and they will only live so long as they keep fighting. Having them join together to convince the nations that there is something wrong is something that we all really expected, but that there's a underlying threat that both nations face is something that confirms the existence of a third party, and it doesn't seem to be the Ouroboros like we thought. I'm going to get into that once we get into the trailer. The second thing that I wanted to post is this updated relationship chart. This one was translated by Magpie on Twitter, who I am going to link down below. This is honestly the cleanest translation that I was able to find. The new chart has a couple of new characters and also shows some of the interactions or perhaps initial thoughts the main cast has with one another at the start of their journey. I'll pull it up every now and then when we are referencing the newly revealed characters. Speaking of, we're going to start out with a new character, Ethel, immediately calling our cast monsters. She has silver hair and fights with dual blades, and we can see a tattoo on her chest, so she's clearly a soldier or someone involved with the military. It's important here to see as well that unlike most of the rest of the group, there is no part of the tattoo marked red. Could these be potentially timers, that the tattoo starts red for everyone and then fades as those 10 years drag on? Is she at the end of her lifespan as a soldier? What's most obviously and importantly noted then is that her right eye is glowing red, and that she cannot focus on the group with the exception to Riku and Manana, a key point I'm going to be picking up on later. Instead, they're simply dark silhouettes with red eyes glaring back. There's big speculation that this is mostly similar to the original appearance of Adam from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in the Spirit Crucible Elpis, as well as potentially the Fog Beast aura from Future Connected. And like I mentioned previously, the motes the beasts gave off are seemingly hinted at in the main title's design. We also see the colony-sized Battle Titan from the desert-like area start advancing on our group, and this makes perfect sense because Silver Ethel, as she is called, is actually a key military affairs leader of Keves, leading Colony 4 and reporting directly under Melia, or the Keves Queen as listed here. So someone with her level of command can directly control colony-sized grade weaponry. There are also ties to her on the affinity chart directly to Noah, having saved him once as a child, and Noah looking up to her as a good friend. We can hear Lance yelling out to her that they're friends, why are you going after us, cut it out, and from Tyon if she has orders to destroy Ouroboros, but she seemingly doesn't care. I'll get into that a bit later, and I will say it's quite obvious that the glowing red eye is manipulating her perception of the people around her. As Noah ponders how the world is now their enemy, we see this gentleman in full Agnes attire also having a red eye, this time the left eye glowing. This man here is Iserd, one of the two Agnes colony military leaders that we're going to be seeing in this trailer. While the chart lists him as Isurugi, this was mostly a common translation issue that occurs often with Japanese names being brought into Western translation, and the English subs on the Nintendo of America trailer that were recently just posted before I started recording this audio have confirmed the full translated name as Iserd. He is the chief of military of the Lambda colony. Now, with both sides having revealed a colony name, it seems that the Keves colonies are numbers, like in the first game, and the Agnes colonies are Greek, which play into the multiple Greek references as Xenoblade Chronicles 2 had. The blue streaks across Iserd's face paint him out to have some sort of blade ties, but some people are thinking he could be a lighter, less metallic machina. I personally can't see this, but who knows. He is regarded as Agnes' best strategist, and prior to the events leading up to the party banding together, Tyon was his primary subordinate, which helps to explain his strategist background a little bit more. The "why are you attacking" on the relationship chart could indicate that, like Ethel, he only sees the group as being Ouroboros and will be fighting them as well. As both Noah and Mio are realizing the whole world is out to get them, they agree that there's a reason they all met, and so they press on. We then get our first glimpse of combat and the combat UI, which I'm going to be touching up more on in a later video. I'm going to use the opportunity instead to talk about what else is happening on the screen. The first part shows the team beset by Keves soldier. Following up is the team going toe-to-toe with a Brog, a classic staple frog-like monster, but just as importantly is our buddy in the background, the one, the only, the level 81 king of starter zones himself, Territorial Rotbard. For those who don't know, this Chad among monkeys is a staple found within all 4 of the Xenoblade games. He's commonly set in one of the earliest low-level zones and is the most prime, or primal, or primate example of the fact that this zone lives and breathes, and all kind of monsters inhabit each and every region of the world in all a bunch of different levels and pure, powerful glory ready to beat up lobies. It's honestly good to see him back. Welcome back, buddy. After this, we see a rather interesting metallic-looking fella. He is an unnamed attacker who is even mentioned on the relationship chart, simply referred to as the Mysterious Giant. Given the penchant for circular patterns this game has been thematically throwing around, I want to say that the circular rings on his abdomen are likely something of import, especially with the lower one bearing an infinity sign. I would, however, like to point out the time and location of this scene. They seem to be confronting the group in the area where the two sides were fighting one another in the first trailer. It could be implied from the chart by showing that he is attacking the group, and we can see Riku and Manana are in that chart area, therefore Riku and Manana could also be present with the group at that point in time as well. Could the group have been saved by the giant by Vandam at this point, and then they were spurned on to work together to reach Sword March? Something to think about. As he begins to completely, absolutely wreck the group, we can hear Vandam tell the group that they share a common enemy, and sure enough, Noah and Mio's consciousnesses, or soul, or ether, or whatever is seemingly fused together. As Noah's right eye and Mio's left eye glow in their collective consciousness, the two feel each other's thoughts, their bodies interlink, a new main mechanic that's going to be central to this game. I bring up the character's eyes glowing for two reasons. The first being that it shows again how Ethel and Noah, being of Kevis, have glowing seemingly on their right eye, while Mio and Izerd have their left eyes glowing. The second is that this lends more weight into the feeling the flickering clocks in our eyes comment that Uni yelled out again. These new forms that Noah and Mio take on are the Ouroboros that the world so absolutely abhors. Looking very similar in appearance to our unknown giant friend, I gotta wonder if the giant himself is an Ouroboros, and if so, are they also a fusion of two other characters? In any case, as the trailer plays on and we see some of the combat capabilities, Lanz gets stuck in, a famous rhyme quote, with Senna, and Uni does the same with Taion, each pair also having their own Ouroboros fusion. Taion speculates that the form is triggered when two people share the same strong desire or feeling, which makes sense considering how both Noah and Mio have the same feelings towards the war as fellow Offseers, and in the next clip with how Senna and Lanz are rushing to their friends' sides. These forms seem to be Weltal, Telos, and Ares 90 inspired, perhaps, which are Xenogears, Xenosaga, and Xenoblade Chronicles X references respectively. It also is interesting to note that the pairings here are specifically one Kevis unit and one Agnes unit. All three pairs presented fulfill that condition. If they fully unlock interlinking prior to reaching Sword Marks, it seems that there are two minimum requirements that are that both people share similar and strong emotions, and that they are members of the opposing factions, and maybe, who knows, they also have flame clocks, both of them. Who knows? Here on the screen are the images of their designs, and they're all really chill to be honest. I think Choco is the one who is working on them. Something to take note of is the core on the chest of the two male-looking ones, but notably Uni and Taion's core is quite a bit lower than the other ones. Don't know if this is just because of the feminine design, or maybe Choco had to squeeze that one in if they did work on it. Something else to note is that the next part where all the units are in their fusion forms together is that Riku and Manana are just hiding behind Noah and Mio's Ouroboros. Presumably, they don't have any Ouroboros circles on their own weapons, or they just don't have a form, and that probably means that as they stay alongside the group, perhaps for these earlier parts, they won't get their own form or anything like that. They'll just be there standing awkwardly while the rest of the group gets to look badass. Following some clips where the other forms are showing off their skills, we get a real kicker of an image as we have a young Noah able to look around in this town that is seemingly frozen in place, very reminiscent of Xenoblade Chronicles 1's Hom's colonies. And of course the money shot is in the sky, presumably the earth above. This potentially throws out a lot of the speculation about the fusion of the worlds of both previous games happening at a certain point in time, and brings on a new theory in which the worlds were merged very recently in history, perhaps even forcibly so by this third party that the GameStop information seemed to have confirmed. Noah's presumed age here, while unknown at this time, shows us that the time between the merging of the two worlds and the current day could have been more than maybe a decade at most. Again, paired with the GameStop information drop, the soldiers have really only had 10 years at most to live and to fight. There's absolutely no way that Noah and everyone else in the group hasn't already been fighting for some time. They really were child soldiers, maybe enlisted shortly after the worlds merged, and even giving us more of a reason to worry about Mio, considering she's a year older than the rest of our party. The scene itself could be a vision or a recreation of the past that Noah will observe at some point in the journey, maybe at Sword March itself. And the color palette used here gives me the same vibes of the scene where Alvis reveals the truth of his existence and Zanza's history to Shulk after he defeats Zanza. As he gazes at the planet above, we then hear Melia say that all prior orders are rescinded and that Ouroboros are to be eliminated at all costs. One thing to note here is that the US trailer's subtitles confirm that this is indeed Melia. It's a little too soon to say if maybe it's a fake and they just used Melia for the subtitles, but regardless, we have no doubt that she is alive or is some major role in this, and we can presume the same thing for Nia as well. There's nothing really we can glean about the line she said, but the key point is the image itself. Behind her could either be her throne room or the core of a colony weapon, as it has the circular pattern that all machinery in this game seem to have, or maybe even both if she rules over her own specific super colony or something. Following this is a scene of Tyon begging for who I believe to be Iserd to stop the madness and not attack, similar to how Noah and Lance were yelling at Ethel to snap out of it. Tyon, not really budging from his disbelief that his former mentor would attack him, is gripped and rescued by Uni, swooping in to push him down before he gets hit. The weapon itself seems to be the White Colony weapon we saw in the previous trailer, giving a hint as to when we may see this cutscene in the game. This may also be the point of the journey that Uni and Tyon experience their first interlinked, as their emotions are running very high and they are within close physical proximity, not to mention of course that they are of opposing factions. An uninteresting additional shot of Nia takes up a small second of the trailer, as who I believe is Iserd yells, "This is my revenge, it's payback for Nimue dying with her wish unfulfilled." He is seen here looking at a unique looking machine that I don't believe we saw in either trailer up till this point, but it is obviously Agnes inspired. It's a little hard to tell if this beam the machine is charging is firing directly at him, maybe complying with some order he gave it as he doesn't seem to be in disbelief, or it's firing over him, but Nimue is a person we have not heard of before. We can glean that it's perhaps this woman presented in the next slide with traditional looking Agnes attire, and very importantly, she seems to be clutching something very close to her with her right arm that is now entirely rock-like and a core crystal blue color. She also has 2 spikes above her left eye, so she may have come under the influence of something that corrupted her, or the time left in her flame clock has run out, and that these were a part of the effects of the flickering of her clock in her last few months. Maybe she was a soldier in Iserd's generation that then succumbed to the flame clock, and now Iserd is torn and taking out his revenge against the system in some way, but is clearly corrupted by the glowing red eye. The second personal money shot message comes up right after. The mysterious giant shouts, "It's a wild ride, this passage of fate," a phrase that has so much weight for the people who have played through Xenoblade Chronicles 1. The passage of fate is a phrase commonly brought up by both Alvis and Zanza, characters who could peer into the future through foresight. Zanza himself being a god who set up the cycle of using ether of the people of Bionis as fuel for a cycle of eternal death and rebirth, so that he could forever stay as that world's god. This is even scarier to think about given that Tyon is yelling out in the first trailer, "They're not your friends anymore, they're his fuel." I know there are many people who do not think fondly of Zanza as a villain, and I honestly hope he is not back in some form or another, but it's very hard for me to not think about this in any other form or context that we currently have. Alvis meanwhile set off somewhere after the events of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and prior to leaving told Shulk he saw everyone walking together hand in hand, which, let's be honest here bud, that doesn't look like it's the case anymore. Could something have happened to him? Could Luxon's prediction of a corrupted Alvis be a reality, and suddenly I'm going to have to kill one of my favorite characters? I hope not. Before the giant goes on saying the next line, we have a small clip of a cat girl, so Agnes' side character, wielding what looks like to be a bow. Her name isn't shown, but the weapon at least insinuates she's a soldier, so who knows, maybe she will join us later on. That's really all I have to say about her as of now. The mysterious giant then says, "We got ourselves a nice little awakening," a potential reference to how blades were awakened from their core crystals in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. A deleted post by Nintendo of Europe, which was briefly revealed just as I was wrapping up writing the script for this video, thankfully, says soldiers of Keves and Agnes can materialize the weapons they use in battle, known as blades at will. Each soldier's blade is a reflection of them, so they might take different forms such as swords, guns, shields, or spears. Note how blade is capitalized, but from what we know it's obviously not in the same aspect of Xenoblade Chronicles 2's blades and blade system, but seemingly inspired that their weapons can awaken to even further potential. And sure enough, as the giant finishes his statement, Noah is in the air and just straight up pulls the main frame of his sword out with his right hand, and the left, which looks like it served more of as a sheath, flies around and wraps around his arm. This ties in more of the samurai aesthetic and description that Nintendo pushed for in the initial trailer and description. But what's a little jarring is that in slow motion, we can see parts of Noah's left arm move around and have almost metallic parts, leading some to speculate that his left arm is actually a prosthetic. People are leaning into this further by suggesting that Noah was dismembered as a youth and that he was rescued by Ethel as depicted in the relationship chart. This could also well just be a funky animation quirk, and it's not really something that could be seen unless it was slowed down frame by frame. You could also see his whole arm being displaced upward at one frame, so it may just be something as simple as that. Next up, we have a very hot bright blade being drawn at Uni, very notably at her right eye. Keep in mind this is the eye that the Kev's units glow red, and maybe this is the eye the flame clock for Kev's units are stored in. Uni is in a state of disbelief, exclaiming, "Why is my name on here?" Suggesting that she's not actually saying this at the part of the game unless the blade literally has her name on it or something, and that it's just a line ripped from somewhere else when the cast probably will come across something important, maybe a draft form for the war or something. We then see another new character come onto the screen, someone who looks to be a machina on the floor, being protected from a Kev's-like weapon by a small robot that is creating a protective barrier. This person was seen as a support member later on in the trailer, so there's a lot of potential that we have a Minion Mancer type character. It's the kind of character who spawns in other creatures or machines, or what have you, to deal damage. Think of an engineer setting up turrets or sentries to do the work for them. They're often some of my favorite to play characters in many games, so I'm totally down to see this here. Following this is the reveal of our next new character, another Agnes colony leader of Colony Delta Bright Red Kamurabi, not Kamunabi for the same reason that Iserd is not actually Isurugi as originally translated on the relationship chart. Mio supposedly heard rumors of his prowess as a warrior, but also he has a tie-in to Ethel, calling themselves fated rivals. Perhaps among their generation of soldiers, they fought toe-to-toe against one another so many times that they've just become pure rivals. In this cutscene, they're controlling colony-class machines in a way that is similar to how both Zanza and Egil controlled the Bionis and the Mechanis, using their bodies and weapons from some manner of cockpit to simulate the way that the machine will move and respond. The area around them seems to be in the center of one big battlefield, so maybe as Ethel was attacking the group in the earlier cutscene, Kamurabi swoops in, and even with the orders to attack the Ouroboros in place, seeing his fated rival out in the battlefield in the open prompts him to attack. The way he speaks, saying, "My way demands we fight," way being capitalized in the subtitles, suggests he follows his own code of conduct, so we can expect him to be a very serious character. And following his own intuition and code, even above the order to attack Ouroboros when his rival is right there, could very well be something that would happen. The build-up this scene gave us is then cut short when Manana comes spinning in on a dish pot, saying she'll help with the fighting, and the trailer goes into its third and final round of combat presentation. This point may be a good time for me to bring up the Nopon on the relationship chart. Manana is in charge of cooking, so she is quite literally throwing her cooking pan or pot around on the floor and running over around it as part of her combat, which Riku can't really believe, and neither can I. Manana insists that she can't engage the enemy without a gemstone, so if the gemstone is an actual plot device or a gag item remains to be seen. Riku is the group's mechanic, asking Noah what is there to repair, so given the way that things are set up, the Nopon are going to act as the backbone of the team, helping with repairs and filling up their bellies. But they're clearly fighters too. In this first part of the combat montage, Riku and Manana are attackers working together, filling the role of one character. This also shows us that the total number of units playable at a time is indeed 7 units, which is absolutely crazy to try and keep track of, at least right now maybe. The playable character list doesn't stop just there though, as there are immediate transitions to Zeon, someone we haven't even seen in this trailer, be on our roster here. He seems to be a High Entia, although with very dilute High Entia blood, sporting very small brown wings. This is also a very incredibly confusing image, which I'm going to be talking about a lot of in my combat analysis video. But I may as well point to your attention quickly how everyone is running around in different gear and has different roles. Noah and Senna, for example, are tanks, whereas they were just attackers in the previous scene, and their clothes have swapped accordingly, not just with the characters, but with practically all the cast members on screen. This highlights that all of our units will inherit the class system of Xenoblade Chronicles X, where the main insert character, Cross, could take up any class after unlocking and working towards its ability set. This may be a little disappointing, if only for the reason that gear will seemingly be linked directly to the weapon being used, so we won't be able to put fashion gear over our characters. It's a shame, but at least there will be some design variety to go around, compared to how we had to wait for DLC costumes for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. In this third clip, as Noah ponders how he's never used this kind of blade before, but he can feel how to use all of its techniques, blade being in all caps again in the subtitles, we briefly see our unknown Machina Minion Mancer girl pop up on the active character list to the left, giving her the name Valdi. The scene transitions into Noah using Dion's weapon and gear, start up a chain attack, a battle system from both Chronicles 1 and 2. In the startup to the chain attack, we see quick cutouts of all the characters' eyes, a la Persona style, glinting either right on the Kevis units or left on the Agnes units. Just another nod to the attribute becoming more and more glaring for us to observe. The chain attack system seems to have been given a new coat of paint, as it's intertwined with a TP system that I'll get into in my combat analysis video, but it's just cool to see that at the very least, chain attacks retain their flashiness that they were given in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Following the combat scenes, we have Vandam, his full name on the chart being revealed as Guernica Vandam, Guernica being his first name, pops back in, and as he smashes a button, which I hope is not a bomb and we do not have another dead Vandam, please no, he says the only thing that can change all this is the will of Ouroboros, obviously hinting at as the Ouroboros hold much more value than just the interlinked forms of the cast, as something we all suspect, so nothing really too insightful here. However, there's more to this part of the trailer than meets the eye. This was pointed out by Mark Autumn on the UK trailers video up on YouTube. Try and focus to the music presented in this segment.
The only thing that can change all this is the will of Ouroboros. You kids, and you alone.
If you haven't picked up on it already, this is a combined motif involving Engage the Enemy from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Counterattack from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This is awesome. I really hope this isn't the only track that plays from elements of both soundtracks from both prior games like this. I really do want to see more. Now, unfortunately for us, the trailer is starting to reach its conclusion, and a girl we haven't heard before says, "Not that I have all that much time to spare, but soon, ... The US trailer sub came in clutch before this video's audio was recorded, and we know that this is actually Nimue, so this is perhaps something she may have said to Iserd before she has passed away. This cute shot of Mio smiling at the camera as she finishes writing or looking down in her journal is next, with her saying, "Finding a path that lets us all live, I will make that my mission." Again, not something super insightful, we already gleaned this from the first trailer. The scene ends with the characters looking up to motes of blue light in a very somber tone. Perhaps someone or something has just passed away in front of them. Is this the ether of someone's life? There's what looks to be a pilotable machine in front of the group, and they're standing in the battlefield-esque zone that they've thrown around a lot in these trailers, but there's something very important that hasn't been addressed. Where are the flutes? We were told that the Offseer's flutes are going to be a very symbolic part of the game, but we didn't quite see any of those in this trailer. Well, remember the flutes are given out to the Offseers and that their role is with remembering those who were lost in battle. Note that everyone aside from Noah and Mio, who are in the center of the group, are looking up at the motes of light, while both Noah and Mio appear to be playing the flutes. It's just that the cast's backs are turned away from the camera. Adding to the motes of light is the title appearing to call the conclusion of the trailer, and with that our speculation has come to an end. The video doesn't end there quite just yet, however, as the updated release date of July 29, 2022 is posted, followed shortly by the announcement of the collector's edition of the game. As far as I know, all regions share the same collector's edition, the game, the box, a new steel box with a unique cover, and an art book. The collector's edition is available to pre-order only on the My Nintendo store of each region, so I pray that there will be an adequate supply and scalping will be minimal, even though I know that's probably not going to be a realistic case. A man can hope. Other important things noted on retail websites include the fact that the game is listed with in-game purchases on the main Nintendo page for the game. This could allude to costume packs, characters, new story, a lot really, considering what the DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 did for that game. Also shortly after, the ESRB rating summary for the game was posted and is as follows. This is a role-playing game in which players follow fighters through a conflict between two nations. From a third-person perspective, players complete quests and engage in melee battle against enemies, animals, creatures, human boss characters. Combat is highlighted by impact sounds, explosions, and cries of pain. Cutscenes depict further instances of violence, characters impaled by sword, a character shooting herself off screen, a man stabbing himself off screen. A handful of scenes depict blood, droplets falling from a wounded character, drips of blood on a character's face. Some fantasy characters or creatures are designed with revealing armor and or anatomy. And there's bad language. Okay, stuff that's pretty straightforward, but characters killing themselves off screen is going to allude, obviously, to people we may grow fond of choosing to off themselves. Now, many of these darker tones have been present in both Xenosaga and in Xenogears, including people committing suicide and very, very dark and unpleasant scenes involving the female cast that I am by no means going to mention here. We've also seen people commit suicide off screen before in Xenoblade Chronicles X as well. In short, many of these ratings are things that have occurred prior, but it is nice in my opinion that we're going to have things like blood depicted as opposed to just clean sparkling lights that we had in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. One last thing of importance is that, at least for Nintendo of Japan, I'm not sure about other regions, the game is going to be shipped on release day, but the rest of the collector's edition, should you want it, won't be shipped out until fall. A lot of people believe this is because of the fact that the game itself was ready and just pushed ahead on its release date, but all the physical material like production of the steelbook and the art book was still set up for that September release, which makes sense. I think that the push forward for the date actually occurred because of the delay of Breath of the Wild 2. As we all know, Monolith Soft had its resources spread thin, helping out with the first Breath of the Wild's production. So when the call was made internally to push back Breath of the Wild 2, likely a couple months ago, I imagine that the development team, which by the way is far larger than back when Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was being produced, had a lot more immediate time and leniency to help with polishing up the game. Hopefully this means better tutorials and not everything hidden behind data mining, please. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if some review outlets or even unique individuals like Chugga Conroy are going to be receiving a pre-release test version of the game within the coming few weeks. And that is where I'm going to be ending this analysis video, using mostly only prior Xenoblade Chronicles games as a reference. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of this gargantuan video. I always love talking about Xenoblade Chronicles in any capacity, I just love this series so much. But please, tell me, what do you think? Do you have your own thoughts on anything that I brought up, or is there something you think is interpreted differently? Let me know in the comments below. You can also reach out to me on my Twitter, where I'm far more active on a daily basis. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking it and subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much for your time, and as always, have a great day.